Hello, I'm Lydia Burns, cheese maven extraordinaire and server at Supercana International, and this is Pilot Light Family Meal. Today I'll be showing you how to make my mom's delicious carrot dip. Let's go! What you're gonna need is a 1 pound bag of carrots like this. If you're anything like me, you've got one of these bags hanging out in your vegetable crisper at all times. This is all you need to do to turn it into a delicious snack. First, we're gonna peel the carrots. Now, if they have been hanging out a while, some of your carrots might have these little hairs, little sprouts of growth, and honestly, it's perfectly fine for this recipe. We're gonna be, like I said, we're gonna be peeling them, so you're gonna peel them right off. Hate to have those carrots go to waste. Then once all your carrots are peeled, we're just gonna cut off either of the nubby little edges, and then we're gonna cut them into about 1-inch segments. It doesn't have to be exact, you just want the carrots to be about the same size so that they cook up evenly. So towards the fatter end, you might cut them a little shorter. Towards the skinnier end, they might be a little bit longer so that they're about the same in weight. So you're gonna put them in a pot and cover them in about an inch and a half of water. Doesn't really matter, doesn't have to be exact, just enough to get them cooked, but you don't need to bother with too much excess water in there. And then we're gonna turn that on. Gonna bring this to a boil, and then we are gonna let this cook for about 10 minutes or until the carrots are tender, which I'll show you after. While the carrots are boiling, we're gonna get started on the dressing. What you're gonna need for that is the remainder of the ingredients, and I'm using a food processor because it makes it a lot easier. But if you don't have a food processor, you can use a blender, or if you don't have that, you can also make all of this by hand. Instead, you're just going to whisk all the ingredients in a bowl big enough that you can then mash the carrots in. So what you're gonna need for this step is 3.5 tablespoons of oil. I'm using olive oil, but you can use any oil that you like to cook with. I'm gonna do 1/4 cup of vinegar. And then we have 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, a 1/2 teaspoon of paprika, and I add a little bit of turmeric. That is totally optional. It doesn't affect the flavor. It just gives it a really bright, vibrant hue. 1 teaspoon of salt, and then a nice nub of fresh ginger, and some garlic cloves. You really only need 2, but if you're like me and you love garlic, go ahead and throw a couple extra in there. So first you're gonna peel the ginger. I actually, because of the knobbiness of the ginger, I like to use a spoon. That way you don't lose too much of the actual ginger, whereas using a knife or a peeler, sometimes you can't really get in those little crevices. I'm gonna take a normal box grater. If you don't have a box grater, you can just chop this by hand. You're just gonna mince it up. So I usually take the smaller side of the box grater. Watch your fingers. Move on to the garlic. Just cut the little edges off the garlic. Like I said, in my case, I'm gonna let the machine do the work. So I'm just gonna smash them and throw them in there. Again, if you're doing it by hand, you're gonna wanna go ahead and chop those up, mince them up. Just gonna go ahead and pulse this for about 30 seconds or until that garlic is all chopped up. We are going to add the liquid ingredients, the salt, and the spices. Again, you can whisk this by hand. Just gonna go ahead and pulse that for about 30 seconds or until it's mixed. How do you know if they're done? Well, the way I like them is a little al dente. See, the fork goes through them, but doesn't completely disintegrate them. Now, if you are making this recipe by hand and you're not using a food processor, you're gonna wanna go ahead and cook those a little bit longer than this, maybe an additional 5 minutes. Just gonna drop these into the food processor. Make sure you get them all. We're gonna turn this on until the carrots form a nice and smooth consistency. Usually takes about 2 minutes in a food processor, maybe a little longer in a blender. If you're using a blender, you're gonna wanna stop it periodically and scrape down the sides, make sure all the little bits of carrot get incorporated. Again, if you're making it by hand, you're gonna mash it up until it reaches your desired consistency. Beautiful, smooth, dippy consistency. After the dip has chilled in the fridge for at least 30 minutes or until it gets nice and cool, then we get to garnish and serve. You can garnish with a variety of things. I always like to garnish with something fresh if you have it. I'm going to be using some fresh parsley that I tore up. Also, chopped fresh chives are good. And if you don't have any of those, that's okay too. It's perfectly good on its own. I also like to get a little crunch in there. So sometimes I also additionally sprinkle it with dukkha, which is a spice blend that has sesame seeds in it for a little crunch. If you don't have that, if you have the everything spice that's really popular at Trader Joe's, that's really good on top, or any kind of seed. But like I said, it's perfectly delicious on its own. Can serve with bread, pretzels, anything really you want to dip in it, or if you'd like to turn it into a meal, spread on bread and top with some protein or some sauteed vegetables and make a delicious sandwich. Carrots are really rich in beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is an antioxidant found in plants. Little tip off, usually if something is orange in hue, it tends to be rich in beta-carotene. Now, beta-carotene is important because your body converts it into vitamin A, which aids in vision, skin development, and cell growth and development, which is particularly important if you're a growing being. Now, the only problem is that raw carrots consumed on their own do not have very much bioavailability of the beta-carotene. Now, this is just a fancy way, bioavailability is a fancy way of saying how much of that nutrient your body is able to absorb and actually utilize. Beta-carotene happens to be fat soluble. So as soon as you add a fat into the mix, your body is able to absorb a lot more of it. So in the case of this recipe, we used oil, which is gonna help with that absorption. Additionally, the processes of cooking and pureeing the carrots maximizes the bioavailability of those carrots. So in this snack, you can now absorb about 40% of the beta-carotene that is naturally found in carrots, making it not only delicious, but also nutritious. Thanks for joining me again today. Tag us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Pilot Light Chefs, #PLFamilyMeal. And don't forget to visit the Food Education Center. Click on the Family Resources, and there you'll find today's recipe, as well as additional activities to do with today's recipe. There you'll also find additional family lessons and videos.
We want to know how you and your family are enjoying this recipe and making it together. So tag us. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Pilot Light Chefs, #PLFamilyMeal.